Why did God create Lucifer? If he already knew he would rebel. This is one of the sharpest questions ever aimed at the Christian faith. And if you are completely honest, you have asked it yourself. Think about what that question actually implies. If God truly saw the end from the beginning, he did not simply allow the fall of Lucifer. He breathed life into the being who would become the devil. Why would a good God do that? Today we are going to explore one of the deepest mysteries in all of Scripture. And if you stay until the end, what you find will not just answer the question. It will permanently change how you see God, how you see evil, and how you see yourself. And the next time someone uses this question to attack your faith, you will have an answer. Let us begin where every honest believer eventually has to begin. If God knew Lucifer would fall, isn't God responsible for evil? This is the question that has shaken the faith of millions. It is the question whispered in dark hospital rooms when the diagnosis comes back. It is the question screamed at funerals when caskets are lowered into the cold earth. It is the question every honest believer eventually has to wrestle with in the silence of the long night. Because if God is truly all-knowing and all-powerful, then nothing that exists by accident, including the devil himself. The mind recoils from this. The heart resists it. Because if we admit that God knew, and we admit that God created anyway, then the simplest conclusion seems to be that God is the ultimate author of every horror that has ever existed. And if that is true, then the God of the Bible is not the God we have been told about. He is something colder, something complicit, something that perhaps does not deserve our worship. But this conclusion, however obvious it appears at first glance, is built on a fundamental confusion. A confusion between two things that look identical from a distance, but are infinitely different up close. The confusion between foreknowledge and causation. Consider this for a moment. Imagine you are sitting at home watching a recorded football match. You already know the final score. You know exactly which player will fumble the ball in the third quarter. You know which kick will miss in the final seconds of the game. You can tell anyone in the room exactly what is about to happen because you have already seen the outcome unfold. But here is the question that changes everything. Did your knowledge cause the players to lose the game? Did your awareness of the fumble force the player's hand to slip? Of course not. Your knowledge of the event is completely separate from your authorship of the event. You are an observer of a story that has already played out. You did not write it. You did not push the buttons. You simply saw it from the outside. This is the difference between God and a dictator. A dictator forces outcomes. God knows them. From eternity past, before the first atom was ever spoken into existence, God saw the entire film of human history play out before him. He saw Lucifer's pride. He saw Adam's bite. He saw Cain's stone. He saw every single nail that would ever be driven into his own son's wrists. He knew. But knowing is not the same thing as causing. Scripture itself draws this line in iron. The book of James, chapter 1, verse 13 says it plainly. God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself tempts no one. The author of light cannot be the author of darkness. It is a contradiction in the very nature of who he is. But this raises an even deeper question. If God did not create evil, then where did evil come from? And here is where one of the greatest minds in church history gives us the answer that is held for 16 centuries. Augustine of Hippo looked at this question and said something that changed theology forever. Evil, he said, is not a thing. Evil is not a substance. Evil is not something God manufactured and placed inside his creation like a dark ingredient secretly mixed into a recipe. Evil is the absence of good. It is darkness, and darkness is not a created thing. Darkness is what naturally exists when light is removed. God did not create darkness. He created the light. And when one of his most beautiful creations turned his radiant face away from that light, a shadow was cast for the first time in eternity. That shadow is what we call evil. God created a perfect being. The darkness was cast only when that being turned away from the light. But if Lucifer was perfect, if he was the masterpiece of heaven, then a more terrifying question emerges. What exactly was he before the fall? To understand why the rebellion of Lucifer was the most catastrophic event in the history of the universe, you must first understand who he was before that rebellion. And for that, we have to turn to the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 28, where the curtain of eternity is briefly pulled back, and we see a being whose original glory is almost too much for human language to carry. He was called the morning star, the bright one, the seal of perfection. He was full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. He walked in Eden, the garden of God, and his covering was made of every precious stone the human eye could imagine: the sardius, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, the carbuncle, and gold. Imagine a being so radiant that he wore the foundations of the New Jerusalem on his very skin. Imagine a creature whose every movement scattered light like a prism caught in the sun. But beauty was only half of who he was. The text says he was the anointed cherub who covers. The cherub, the one who stood closest to the throne of God himself, the one whose outstretched wings covered the very glory of the Almighty. He was not a soldier in the back ranks of heaven. He was the worship leader of the entire universe. The music of the spheres flowed through him. Every song lifted in heaven passed across his lips before it ever reached the throne. He stood at the center of cosmic worship. He was the highest creature God ever made, and this is precisely what makes his treason unbearable. This is what makes the fall of Lucifer infinitely more tragic than the fall of any other being. Because he did not rebel from a place of ignorance, he rebelled from a place of intimacy. He stood closer to God than any creature ever has, and he looked at that infinite glory, and he said, "I want it for myself." But here is where the question sharpens to a knife edge. Why did God give such a powerful being free will at all? Why install a switch in him that could ever be flipped toward rebellion? Why not simply program him to obey? Because a will constrained to only one outcome is not a will. It is programming. A choice with only one option is not a choice at all. It is a track. A robot that says, "I love you," because its circuits were wired to produce those words, has not loved anyone. It has only performed love. And God, who is love itself, did not want a heaven full of mannequins. He wanted a family. He wanted worship that was chosen, not extracted. He wanted love that was offered, not forced. And the only way to have that, the only way in the entire architecture of existence, was to allow the option of rebellion. The risk was the price of a relationship. Without the possibility of betrayal, there can be no possibility of true loyalty. But this raises another sharp objection. Some will say, what about the angels who did not fall? What about Michael and Gabriel and the millions of holy ones who stayed loyal through it all? They had free will too, and they did not rebel. So why was Lucifer's fall necessary? The answer is that the angels who remained loyal did not stay loyal in ignorance. They stayed loyal, having watched Lucifer's rebellion unfold before their eyes, having seen the consequences of pride, having witnessed firsthand what life apart from God actually produces. Their loyalty was informed, it was tested, it was proven. And humanity's redemption operates on the very same logic. We choose God having seen the full cost of choosing otherwise. But even if we accept that God had to give Lucifer the option to rebel, an even harder question remains, and it cuts to the bone. The moment Lucifer rebelled, why didn't God simply vaporize him on the spot? Why didn't he end the threat instantly? Why let this fallen worship leader walk into the Garden of Eden, slither up to a tree, and corrupt an entire human race? If God hates evil, why give it room to grow? To answer this, we have to understand something almost no one in modern Christianity teaches anymore. The rebellion of Lucifer was not just a temper tantrum. It was not a moment of spiritual road rage. It was not the impulsive lashing out of a creature having a bad day. It was a legal accusation. It was a charge filed against the throne of God himself. When Lucifer lifted up his heart, he did not simply say, "I want more power." He said something far more dangerous than that. He accused God. He accused the Most High of being a tyrant who rules by fear, not by love. He accused the Almighty of demanding worship he did not deserve. He accused the King of the universe of running a kingdom built on coercion. He accused the very source of love of being a fraud. And in that moment, a courtroom was opened in the heavens, and a charge was filed against God himself. Now imagine the divine dilemma. If God, the moment that accusation was made, simply incinerated Lucifer with a flick of his finger, what would the watching universe conclude? They would conclude that Lucifer was right. They would say, "See, the king kills anyone who questions him. He rules by terror after all." The accusation, in the silence of Lucifer's destruction, would have been confirmed forever.
And every angel in heaven from that moment forward would have served God not out of love, but out of fear of being the next one vaporized for asking the wrong question. That is the trap. That is the precise reason God could not simply end it. To destroy Lucifer instantly would have been to lose the moral argument of all eternity. Lucifer would have become a martyr. His accusation would have echoed forever, unanswered. Every loyal angel would have watched their highest brother executed for raising a question, and a seed of fear would have been planted in the soil of every worship song from that day forward. So God did something that staggers the imagination. He allowed the trial. He let the case go to evidence. He opened the courtroom of eternity, and he gave the accuser the floor. And we are not guessing here. We are not speculating. The Bible literally shows us this courtroom in operation. Open the book of Job, chapters 1 and 2, and watch carefully what unfolds. This is not poetic language. This is not metaphor. This is a literal scene from the throne room of the universe, and it deserves to be read slowly. Picture it. There is a day when the sons of God present themselves before the Lord. The phrase "the sons of God" in Hebrew refers to the high council of heaven, the angelic court, the watching beings of every rank and order, gathered before the throne. The session opens. Heaven is in formal assembly. And then, walking through that assembly, comes a figure no one expected to see, standing there. Satan, the fallen one, the accuser. He moves through the court of holy beings and takes his place before the throne. And the silence in that moment must have been deafening. The watching angels do not move. The seraphim do not speak. The session pauses. The accuser of the brethren is standing in the very place he tried to overthrow, and the throne does not strike him down. Then the Almighty, the creator of galaxies, the one who could have ended the entire scene with a single thought, does something almost incomprehensible. He speaks first. He asks him a question. "Where have you come from?" And the courtroom waits. And Satan answers, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." read what is happening in that scene. The devil is standing in the throne room of God. He is not in hell. He is not bound. He is not in chains. He is in the courtroom of heaven, acting as the prosecuting attorney of the universe. And he is making a case before the highest court that exists. He is filing motions. He is naming names. He is calling for evidence. And then he points his finger at one man, Job. He says, "Job only loves you because you bless him. Take away the blessing, and he will curse you to your face." That is not a complaint. That is a legal accusation. That is a trial filed against humanity itself, and indirectly against God's claim that genuine love can exist on the earth at all. Satan is essentially saying, your entire creation project is a fraud. The love you receive from these creatures is bought, not real. Remove the bribery, and the worship collapses. And what does God do? Does he silence the accuser? Does he throw him out of the court? Does he end the case before it is heard? No. God allows the trial. He lets the accusation be tested in open court, not because he is uncertain of the outcome, but because his justice demands that the accusation be answered with evidence, not with brute force. And Job, somewhere on the earth, completely unaware that he has been named in a cosmic legal proceeding, is about to become the lead witness in a trial that will echo for eternity. This is the framework theologians have called the Great Controversy. The earth itself is the courtroom of the universe. Every generation, every life, every act of faith under suffering is evidence in a cosmic trial. Every prayer whispered in the dark is a deposition. Every act of love offered in pain is a closing argument. Every soul that chooses God, when there is no earthly reason to choose Him, is another witness called to the stand. Lucifer's philosophy, that you can have life apart from God, that you can build a kingdom without the king, that creatures can rule themselves and prosper, that love is only real when it is paid for, that philosophy had to be allowed to mature, it had to be tested, it had to be allowed to bear its full fruit, so that every watching being in every corner of creation could see, with their own eyes, what life without God actually produces. It produces war, it produces disease, it produces graves, it produces tyrants and orphans and broken bodies in the streets. It produces children dying in famines while empires grow fat. It produces brothers killing brothers over lines drawn on a map. It produces 6,000 years of human history, written in blood and sealed in tears. The trial of the universe is not a mystery to God. It is a demonstration to everyone else. And once the evidence is fully presented, once the case is closed, once every motion has been heard and every witness has spoken, no creature in any corner of eternity will ever again raise the accusation that God is anything but love. The verdict will be self-evident. The case will be sealed. And the rebellion will be silenced not by force, not by fire, not by divine intimidation, but by the overwhelming, unanswerable weight of evidence. But here is where everything you have ever assumed about the story of Lucifer must be quietly set down and reconsidered from the ground up. Because we have all been taught, from the time we were children, that Lucifer ruined God's perfect plan, that Eden was the goal, and the serpent ruined it. And ever since that catastrophic afternoon in the garden, God has been scrambling to repair the damage. That the entire history of humanity is one long, painful recovery from a setback God did not see coming. But the Garden of Eden was never the finish line. Eden was the starting point. Eden was the seed. Eden was a doorway, and a doorway is not a destination. The finish line was always something far greater, a redeemed family, battle-tested and unshakable, ruling and reigning with the king in a new Jerusalem that would put the original Eden to absolute shame. And to get there, something had to happen that innocence alone could never produce. Innocence had to become loyalty, and loyalty is forged in fire, not in gardens. Now hear this carefully, because this is the place where most theology goes wrong. God did not create the black velvet. God did not author the evil. He is light, and in him there is no darkness at all, not even a shadow of turning. But he knew, in his infinite foreknowledge, that Lucifer would weave that black velvet by his own free choice. And in his absolute sovereignty, God did something only the Almighty could ever do. He hijacked the treason. He took what the enemy meant for evil and laid it down as the dark canvas on which his greatest masterpiece would one day be painted in blood. Think of it like this. You cannot see the brilliance of a diamond on a white table. The light gets lost. The fire inside the stone goes invisible. But place that same diamond on black velvet, and suddenly every facet, every angle, every spark of light trapped inside that stone explodes into visibility. The darkness does not create the diamond. The darkness reveals it. And it is not just the diamond. Every great attribute in existence requires its opposite to be seen. A hero is only known in the presence of a villain. A doctor is only known in the presence of disease. A firefighter is only known in the presence of flame. A redeemer cannot be known where there is nothing to redeem. Every glory God wanted to display in eternity required a stage. Every name he wanted to be known by, healer, deliverer, redeemer, savior, comforter, shepherd, mighty warrior, lamb that was slain, every single one of those names requires the existence of a wound deep enough to demand them. You cannot understand grace unless there is guilt. You cannot understand mercy unless there is judgment deserved. You cannot understand a rescuer unless there is something terrible to be rescued from. A God who never rescues cannot be known as rescuer. A God who never forgives cannot be known as forgiver. A God who never bleeds for his enemies cannot be known as love that conquers death itself. Lucifer thought his rebellion was tearing apart the very fabric of God's plan. He had no idea that every move he made was being judo-thrown by the hand of the Almighty. Every act of treason became another thread in the dark canvas. Every wound he inflicted became another scar that would one day be glorified. The devil was not writing his own story. He was unintentionally painting the backdrop for God's. He was the chisel that thought it was the sculptor. He was the instrument that proved God's greatest attribute beyond any shadow of doubt. Merciful Savior. Now we come to the moment where the curtain of eternity is pulled all the way back. To the moment that proves, beyond any shadow of argument, that God was never reacting to Lucifer. He was never on the back foot. He was never improvising. He was always one infinite, terrifying step ahead. Open Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 through 15, and listen carefully to the 5 declarations of the fallen one. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of the congregation in the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. 5 times he says it. I will. I will. I will. I will. I will. The entire philosophy of rebellion condensed into 5 syllables of pride. The whole foundation of every coup, every betrayal, every act of cosmic treason ever committed, distilled into 2 short words. But here is the answer that was already written in the eternal counsels of God, before Lucifer ever opened his mouth to speak them. Before Lucifer ever said, I will ascend, God had already said, I will descend. While the morning star was reaching upward, the Most High had already committed to coming downward. Before pride moved a single inch upward, humility had already moved infinitely downward. Open Revelation chapter 13, verse 8. The Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Read those words again, slowly, because they will rearrange your theology if you let them. The Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. Before the first day of creation, before light was separated from darkness, before the morning stars sang together, before any creature drew its first breath, the cross was already standing in the eternal counsels of God. The blood was already shed in the mind of the Father before there was ever a sin to die for. The Lamb was already slain before there was an Adam to fall. The crucifixion was the oldest event in history. The cross was not Plan B. It was not a hastily drafted emergency response generated in the moment Adam took the fruit. It was not a rescue mission improvised after creation went sideways. It was Plan A from before time began. The cross was written in blood before there was even a world that needed redeeming. Eden was not the original plan that got ruined. The cross was the original plan, and Eden was simply the doorway that would lead the human race to it. And someone watching this will say, but if God already planned the cross, doesn't that mean the fall was predetermined? Doesn't that eliminate free will? No. Foreknowledge is not engineering. A doctor's knowledge that a patient will reject treatment does not eliminate the patient's freedom to reject it. The doctor sees the future of the disease. He does not cause it. The doctor's prediction is not the cause of the patient's decision. Knowing the outcome and engineering the outcome are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. God knew. He did not push. The choice was Lucifer's. The choice was Adam's. The choice is yours, even now, in this very moment. The plan was God's. And once you see this, Lucifer's entire strategy collapses into the desperate, panicked flailing of a defeated enemy who simply has not yet been informed of his own defeat. Look at Genesis chapter 6. Many scholars, examining that strange and ancient passage, have noted that Lucifer was not merely tempting humanity in a generic sense. He was attempting something far darker. He was attempting to corrupt the human bloodline itself, to poison the genetic lineage through which the Messiah would one day come, to make the birth of Christ biologically impossible. He was sprinting, desperate, frantic, throwing every weapon he had against a war he believed was still winnable. He had no idea that Plan A was already complete in eternity past. He was fighting a war that had already been won before he ever drew his first breath. The Lamb was already slain. The verdict was already rendered. The serpent was already crushed. He was just the very last creature in the universe to know it. But why? Why was humanity so important in all of this? Why did God risk all of this, allow all of this, endure all of this, for a creature he had not even formed yet when Lucifer first lifted his heart in pride? What did God see in the human race that justified the entire cosmic war? To understand the depth of Lucifer's hatred for you, personally, you have to understand exactly what you are. Angels were created as servants, magnificent, glorious, blazing servants of fire and light, but servants nonetheless. They were made to minister, to carry messages, to stand in the presence of the throne. Humanity was created in something else entirely. Humanity was created in the image of God Himself, not just in His service, in His likeness, in His family. And the material God chose for that masterpiece is the most offensive insult Lucifer ever received in all of eternity. God did not form humanity out of starlight. He did not weave us from the same celestial sound that filled the halls of heaven. He did not craft us from gold or sapphire or fire or jewel. He did not pull us from the same radiant substance that covered the cherub. He bent down. He stooped low. He scooped up the lowest, dirtiest, most common substance in all of his creation, and he pressed it between his own fingers. Dirt, mud, spit, and clay. Common dust from the ground beneath his own feet. The same dust that animals walked on. The same dust that would later soak up Abel's blood. That is what he chose. A being of pure radiance, of celestial music, of jeweled covering and infinite beauty, watched the King of the universe lean down over a pile of common dirt and breathe his own life into it. And the dust stood up. And the dust opened its eyes for the first time. And the dust looked into the face of God. And God called the dust his son. Now stop. Do not rush past that moment. Let it sit in the air for a long second, because that single act broke something in Lucifer that he has never recovered from. Many scholars and ancient traditions suggest that the final crystallization of Lucifer's pride was ignited in the moment God chose to elevate humanity above the angelic order. And what follows is the picture those traditions paint. Imagine the scene from his perspective. Imagine standing there, the seal of perfection, the anointed cherub, every precious stone in creation glittering across his covering. He had stood closer to the throne than any creature ever had. He had led the worship of the universe. He had been the highest, brightest, most beautiful being God ever made. And now, with his own eyes, he watches the King of the cosmos walk away from him. He watches the Almighty lean down toward the ground. He watches the very hands that hung the galaxies plunge into a pile of mud. And then he hears it, the breath, the sound of God breathing his own life into common dirt. And the silence in heaven in that moment must have been deafening. The angels stop. The seraphim do not sing. The watching beings of every rank go quiet, because something is happening that nothing in the cosmos has ever seen before. The God who flung suns into orbit is on his knees over a pile of clay. The God whose voice spoke galaxies into being is whispering life into mud. And then the mud opens its eyes, and the mud looks up, and God smiles, and he calls it son. Lucifer cannot breathe. Lucifer cannot move. He is glorious. He is anointed. He is the seal of perfection covered in every precious stone that has ever existed. And the king has just bypassed him, has just walked past every jeweled angel in the council, has just stepped down from the throne, and has just chosen common dirt for the title that should have been his, son. That is the moment his rage was born, not the moment he said, "I will ascend." That came later. The seed of his rebellion was planted in the second the dust opened its eyes and called God Father. Every demonic attack on humanity since the dawn of time has been driven by that one unbearable truth, that the King of the universe loved the dust more than he loved the diamond, that the Father stooped to call mud his child while the cherub stood watching in fury, that every time a human being lifts their voice in worship, every time a believer prays in the dark, every time a child of dust whispers, "Father," Lucifer hears it, and it is the sound of his own throne being given to clay. But what Lucifer did not understand is that the dirt was always going somewhere. He looked at the mud and saw an insult. God looked at the mud and saw a son who would one day judge the angels who refused to bow. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 3. Do you not know that we will judge angels? The dust will sit on the bench. The dust will hold the gavel. The dust will render the verdict. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 14. Are angels not all ministering spirits, sent forth to serve those who will inherit salvation? The radiant servants of fire are sent to serve the redeemed children of clay. The hierarchy is not what Lucifer thought it was. It never was. Read those two verses together, and the order is permanently locked in place forever. The dust will judge the angel. The servant of fire will minister to the redeemed son of clay. And the worship leader who once covered the throne will spend eternity watching the very people he tried to destroy walk past him as kings and queens of a city he can never enter. Forever. This is the ultimate humiliation. This is the final defeat. God did not just survive Lucifer's rebellion. He used it as the forge. He took the innocent children of the garden, and through the long fire of human history, through the wars, the temptations, the sufferings, the prayers in the dark, the faith held in tears, the love tested by loss, the worship offered in chains, he hammered them into something Eden alone could never have produced. Battle-tested kings, battle-tested queens, a redeemed family that chose him with their eyes wide open after seeing the very worst that the universe could offer them, and chose him anyway. That is a loyalty no rebellion can ever shake again. That is a heaven that can never fall a second time, because the family that fills it has already walked through the fire and refused to bow. They have already seen the alternative and rejected it. And so we arrive at the verse that closes the case forever. Colossians chapter 1, verse 16. All things were created by him and for him. All things, including the morning star, including the anointed cherub, including the one who would one day become the devil himself. Lucifer was created for God's purposes, including purposes Lucifer never consented to, never imagined, and never could have stopped, no matter how hard he tried.
He was a pawn who thought he was a king. He was a brushstroke that thought it was the painter. He was a thread in a tapestry he could not see. And someone will ask, if all of this is true, why is Lucifer still active today? Why is the trial still going on after all these years? Because the trial is not yet concluded. Every generation is still part of the evidence. Every act of faith under suffering is still a closing argument before the watching courts of heaven. The final verdict has not been rendered yet, but it is coming. It is coming at the great white throne, where the books will be opened, the case will be closed, and the accuser of the brethren will be silenced forever. Permanently, without appeal. So here is the answer, the full answer. The answer that theology has wrestled with for centuries and that most pulpits have never fully delivered. God created Lucifer knowing he would fall, because God knew that the temporary tragedy of one rebellion would result in the eternal triumph of redemption. He risked a temporary war to secure an eternal, unshakable loyalty from a redeemed family. He allowed the night so that the dawn would mean something. He allowed the wound so that the healing would carry weight. He allowed the enemy so that the rescuer could be known. He allowed the darkness so that the diamond could finally be seen. The accuser thought he was writing the story. He was only ever setting the stage. That is where the case rests. If this video opened a layer of scripture you had never seen before, share it with someone who is still asking the question. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is what we do on this channel. More is coming.